what do kids say when they're hungry at noon?
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs.
Why are his eyes black? I've survived almost 40 years without ever trying this stupid can. But after 40 years, curiosity has gotten the better of me. Why is this product still on the shelves? Who's eating this thing? And why is it being fed to children? I don't even think kids are eating it. It's probably adults. Now to Campbell's, a tomato puree simply consists of tomato paste and water. And their meatballs not only have chicken, they also have mechanically separated chicken.
Uh-oh.
Which is always what's missing from my canned pasta. So for the very first time, I'm going to see what all the fuss is about. Oh my God. And try SpaghettiOs. Fuck. So sweet. The texture of the pasta is kind of like a mushy jelly ring. I'm terrified to eat a meatball. No. That is next level bad. It's truly an abomination. Smells like hospital food. The meatballs taste like dog food. If I had my choice of what goes in this can, here's what it would be. First up, we're gonna make our little meatballs. And instead of mechanically separated chicken, we're gonna be using some beautiful ground chuck, some ground pork, and some ground veal. About an even amount of all of them. And I have about 10 ounces here. We don't need a ton. They're gonna be super tiny. A little goes a long way. Into that goes 1 egg. And I'm just gonna work that egg into the meat. And why I like to add it to the meat rather than like the rest of the meatball ingredients is because I want to make sure that egg coats every inch of that meat. And if you mix it in with all the other ingredients, like you get pockets that aren't coated, you just get an uneven distribution of the egg. And so my method of making meatballs is to ensure like a complete distribution of all the ingredients. Set this off to the side. And in this, I call it a slurry, but it's basically a version of a panade, which is just egg, bread, and milk mixed together to create like a moist filling. It's the old school way of doing things. So first up, in our SpaghettiOs, we're gonna be using some Mutti tomato passata. This is good quality tomatoes turned into a smooth tomato puree. Just gonna add maybe like a 1/4 cup or so of the puree straight into the bowl. Season that generously with salt. This filling, I want to be super salty because I'm not gonna salt the meat, I'm gonna salt the filling. I'm gonna flavor the filling. That's gonna flavor the meat. To that, some breadcrumbs, maybe a 1/2 cup. For me, the cheese that needs to go into a meatball mix is Pecorino Romano. It's sharper, it's saltier, it helps season the meatballs better. Same amount as the breadcrumbs. Then if you want to finish the sauce and the pasta at the end, that's when I would use the Parmigiano Reggiano. Take a small clove of garlic, and we're gonna grate that on a microplane straight into the meatball mix. We're gonna process that garlic up real nice. Allow it to get evenly incorporated into the meatball mix and not get like chunks of uncooked raw garlic that sort of sting you once the meatballs cook. And then lastly, just a little bunch of fresh parsley. I'm just gonna chop up real fine. You could also add a little cream in there, a little milk. I would if I had some, but I don't, so the passata works fine. What I want to do is mix this up and then taste it, and I want it to be like overly powerfully flavorful and salty. And I know it'll work to season the meat. So I'm just gonna use my hands, scrunch everything into that passata, squeeze it all together, get that flavor all over. Since there's no egg in it, yeah. It's overly salty, but that's what I want. I can taste the cheese. I don't have any burning garlic flavor. It's just nice and subtle, and it just has a lot of flavor. That all goes straight into the meatball mix. And then you want to just work it. Work by squeezing your hand and incorporating all of that breadcrumb garlic mixture into the meat. That's a perfect meatball mix. Now the slightly annoying part. Gonna hit a little flat pan with some olive oil and then just start rolling my meatballs out on that. I'm gonna kind of use my hands, spread out that oil. It's gonna also grease my hands for the meatballs. Sort of take the meat, roll it into like a little bit of a log, and then just start rolling these really tiny meatballs. One could argue the smaller the better. If you want them a little bigger, you can make them a little bigger, but for me, the idea is for like some of the SpaghettiOs to fit in a spoon, along with maybe like 2 or 3 meatballs. Just use your fingertips to smooth out the ball rather than like the palms you would for a larger meatball. And yeah, it might take about 10-15 minutes to roll them out, but they can be rustic. They don't need to be perfect. Basically need about 2 to 3 cups of mini meatballs for this. Now for the SpaghettiOs, we're going with tomato paste. It's how it's made. We're gonna freshen it up with some tomato passata. I'm gonna add some Calabrian chili for acidity, and then a little bit of chicken stock, chicken broth, whatever. Instead of garlic or onion powder, we're gonna add a garlic clove fresh, sliced very thin. And then of course, I'm sure many of you like, how are you gonna do the SpaghettiOs? And it's easy. You're gonna use agnellini. Yes, SpaghettiOs is a real shape. It's just called agnellini. So we're gonna use these. Get a saucier or high rim pot on medium-high heat and add enough olive oil to coat the bottom of the pan. Then in a few batches at a time, we're gonna add some of the meatballs and we're going to brown them on both sides about 1 to 2 minutes, just until they develop nice color. Once you see them develop nice color, using a slotted spoon, remove them from the pan, transfer them to a bowl, and then finish searing off the rest of the meatballs. And I had a little bit of stickage in the pan. I'm just gonna scrape that up, get most of that out of the pan before throwing in my garlic. I just wanna saute that garlic, get it nice, soft, fragrant, and a little bit brown. Once it's softened, we're gonna add in a little bit of the Calabrian chili paste, maybe about a tablespoon, and then I'm gonna go in with that can of tomato paste. I'm gonna cook that tomato paste down for about a good 2 minutes. Hit it with some salt, and once we get in a few minutes to cook, then I'm gonna add in the tomato passata. I'm gonna add about a cup or 2 of that, get that stirred in, then I'm gonna season that as well. We're seasoning in layers. Everything we add, we're gonna add a little bit of salt to that. Once the tomato passata is in, then we can go ahead and add in our quart of broth. And again, to the broth, we're gonna season it with salt. I'm gonna give it a stir, bring it up to a boil. And our agnellini says it's gonna cook for like 12 to 15 minutes. And since we're not boiling them, we're gonna cook them in this pot at a much slower rate. It's gonna probably cook for double the time. So we're gonna cook that for 20 minutes, stirring it often. Since we're cooking it this way, it has a tendency to stick to the bottom of the pan. So throughout the entire cooking process, you're just going to scrape the bottom of the pan to make sure none of that pasta is sticking. Once there's around 4 to 5 minutes left in the cooking, I'm gonna check to see where we're at. The pasta still needs a few more minutes to cook, so I'm gonna add in the meatballs now and reheat them while the pasta finishes cooking. Now the consistency we're looking for is somewhat of a risotto consistency. It should sort of cascade when tossed the same way a risotto does. Now we can give it a taste. We can check for seasoning. It needs a little bit of salt, so I'm gonna work that in. And now the pasta to me is perfectly al dente. The consistency's right. If it was too thick, I might add a little bit of water. If it was too thin, I'd thicken it with some cheese. I can shut the heat off. I'm gonna throw a cover on it and let it just sort of steam and chill for like 2 minutes. After a little rest, we can work in some Parmigiano Reggiano, and then we're ready to plate. Spooning a nice mound of those SpaghettiOs into a bowl, making sure you get a nice amount of those little meatballs along with a nice mound of that spaghetti. A little sprig of basil for some freshness and a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And the difference in quality between this and that dumb little can is truly remarkable. My meatballs are flavorful and tender as butter. The pasta is al dente, but if you're cooking it for a kid, maybe you cook it a little bit softer, but you're still getting a nice quality pasta. And now plating it in a bowl is nice, but if you want to be a little bit more fun, you can just empty out one of those SpaghettiO cans, clean it out, and then serve it right in that. In a can is probably how the kid deep down inside of me really wants to eat this dish. Look, my meatballs have just been refined over 2 decades. Campbell's cannot compete. And just fresh ingredients, good quality tomatoes, good meat. This is acceptable food for adults, not this. It's back to school, it's the fall. You wanna do something fun with the kids, make them this. If you just like SpaghettiOs, you're one of those nostalgic guys. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.